Okay, it's now January 22nd, 2026. This is Linda Feldman, everybody, the White House correspondent for the Christian Science Monitor. And I'm Dan Whitman. Let's have a look at the monitor because I don't know if many of you have even seen the monitor. Um, I am a subscriber. Let's see. Um, oh, yes, there we go. Here's what the monitor looks like, everybody. Uh, It's a point of reference. The Monitor has a very noble and long history. Um, it's had, frankly, a declining readership, but it's still an absolutely rock solid golden source. Its tone is analytical. It never screams. It never expresses any partisan preferences. It just tells you what's going on. Now, all newspapers in the US, as you know, have had trouble meeting their expenses, and many have gone to digital. And Linda can tell us more about this. But here, just for example, here is the one optimistically dated for 4 days from now. Um, but have a look at the sober, serious, and very presentable format here. This is not jazzy. It's not, it doesn't reach out to you and try to pull you in like some of the more cheap phenomena we have of just simply trying to get people's attention. This is um, a really this is a go-to publication. And here's a statement by one of its editors about what it means to the editors of we call it the CSM, the Christian Science Monitor, um, the importance of keeping balance, of avoiding strident policy or political angles, but just simply telling us what's going on with analysis that I know I find very helpful in dealing with issues that sometimes are very emotional and people line up on one side or the other. We're all familiar with um, that occurrence. And the Monitor is one of the few publications left that just simply takes a news story, analyzes it, and gives us the context. So, Linda, I just wanted to give that little background because I'm not sure if our participants today are all that familiar. Tell us about the Monitor and about your work in it.
Yeah, wow. Well, thank you. And thank you for your kind words about the Monitor and thank you for having me. So the Monitor, we've been around since 1908 and
Uh-huh.
the news business has gone through many very large, profound changes over that time. The Monitor was founded to combat yellow journalism,
Uh-huh.
which is a term that refers to maybe, in modern parlance, fake news. I mean, literally,
Yeah. Hmm.
newspapers used to just make stuff up and
Yeah.
try to incite violence, and you had publishers trying to provoke wars. So,
Yeah.
yeah, did you want to jump in?
No, just what I'm thinking of the Spanish-American War.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Um,
So today, the Monitor is unusual in that we don't actually have financial problems. The Monitor hasn't turned a profit since the 1960s, but we are not a religious publication. I should have made that clear at the outset. We are a secular news outlet, but we're published by a church, and the
uh-huh.
church has a commitment to the Monitor and its journalism, and they fund us. So we do charge for subscriptions, but that doesn't cover the costs of what we do. And we have, I think, very importantly, a commitment to covering the world, and
Yep.
that includes we've had reporters in Ukraine since the beginning of the war, since the invasion, and even before that. I mean, I was the Monitor's correspondent in Moscow in the late 80s, early 90s, and traveled to Ukraine then even. we have reporters. So we have reporters all over the globe. Most of them are sort of on a contract. They're not staff. And we have also, of course, people in the United States. We have a Washington bureau. I travel with the president sometimes, and that costs money. The president doesn't invite the press to travel with him for free. We
Yep.
pay for the everything, the cost of the flight, the meals, the hotels. But being with the president, who is often very chatty, is definitely worth it because you get a sense of him that you can't get even from just watching him on TV.
Hmm.
So yeah, the monitor is, we're I call us small but mighty,
Yeah.
and we small staff, big goals, and we do try to be fair and impartial, and I think we succeed most of the time. Nobody's perfect, but
Yep.
and I hear from readers who are upset that we're not screaming in loud opposition to Donald Trump, and then I hear from Trump supporters who read us who are upset that we're not more supportive of Donald Trump. So in some ways, we're pleasing nobody because this country is super polarized. We're either, you're either here or here, and the middle is frighteningly small. So.
Yeah. And they say if you're being criticized by opposite parties, you're probably doing the right thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear you in theory, although sometimes I will read a critique and I'll, yeah, they made a good point. I should have highlighted this more or less on this, more on that. Anyway, you did.
You mean if I write a letter to the editor, there might be I might have some influence. I would never seek to do that.
Yes, you can write to them and tell
Yeah.
them what a great job I'm doing.
Oh, I will do that. Yeah.
Just kidding.
Um, well, you mentioned traveling with the president. Obviously, you're not doing that this week. But tell us more about, you say he's chatty. And, we've heard these things, but of course, none of us have witnessed that. We know that when he's on a plane,
Mhm.
we hear these recorded interviews where there's the rumble of the jet engines in the background. Maybe he likes that. I don't know. But how does he behave differently when he's traveling with the press than when he's in a planned, structured speech environment?
So he is. That's a good question. I think first of all, Donald Trump actually loves the press. He loves the media. So
Uh-huh.
he'll mock us and call us fake news and say terrible things. He'll call female reporters piggy and other terrible things.
Yeah.
But guess what? When you're a kind of self-possessed, self-obsessed like Donald Trump, some say narcissist, having this group of people following you around and hanging on your every word is awesome. I mean, he knows that the press we work out of the West Wing of the White House. I'm not there right now, but
Yeah.
there are press facilities in the West Wing and not too far from the Oval Office. We can't just walk into the
Uh-huh.
Oval, of
Right.
course,
Uh-huh.
but he knows that at any moment he can just walk down the hallway and come in and talk to us,
Oh.
which he did 2 days ago
Ah.
the 1 year anniversary of his second term. He kept us actually hostage in there for 2.5 hours because he was supposed to show up at 1. He didn't show up till 1:45, and then he proceeded to talk for like an hour, over like an hour and 45 minutes.
This was
And
on the occasion of the anniversary of the inauguration. Is that right?
no, yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
of his right, of the
Yeah.
inauguration for the second term.
This was just the day before he left, right? Um,
That's right.
yeah.
And I would
Okay.
say, in terms of how Trump is different, I think the biggest difference actually is when he's on camera versus off camera.
Uh-huh.
When he's got TV cameras on him, he's a performer. I mean, he's identified as a businessman and a real estate developer, but I think the best description of him is as a TV personality from
Uh-huh.
his TV
Hmm.
show. So I feel like he's always programming the next episode of the reality show called The US Presidency. And so when he's on camera, he's quote on and he's, beating up on the press, mocking reporters, saying things, making comments that he knows will get press coverage. when he's off camera, he's frankly more humane. I remember being at his club in West Palm Beach, which is not far from Mar-a-Lago. He was
Uh-huh.
there to watch the Super Bowl. He's having a Super Bowl party at his club in West Palm Beach, and at one point he had the press. The press weren't allowed to attend the party. We were sitting in a bar lounge area, um, away from his guests. But he came in and we all gathered round, and he was actually very gracious. He turned into his former self, the hotelier,
Uh-huh.
the host, the man who hosts, has a party, has a gathering, and wants everybody to enjoy themselves. So he said to us, "How are you doing? How's the food? Are you enjoying the game?" I mean, he was actually very nice to us. He wanted us to be enjoying his club. So I thought, wow, that's a different Donald Trump that we don't usually see. And there were no TV cameras running. So it wasn't off the record, but it just wasn't on camera.
That's remarkable. Every time someone asks an observer what's going through his mind, the answer is always, "I'm not a psychiatrist." But this is remarkable that there's these very different personae, and we've heard him be viciously critical of in his rallies of the very cameras that are recording him. You would think the camera people would say, "We're covering you. Don't you want us here?" I mean, but has that softened a bit in recent years? During the first term, he was quite vicious towards
Right.
the people who were giving him the coverage that he wanted to have.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, exactly. And I mean, and to be honest, it's frightening when he says that, particularly at a domestic
oh,
rally in the United States, because somebody seriously could take a shot at us.
right.
Look at the violence we've had in this country in recent years. His own assassination attempt, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, major conservative activist.
Yeah.
Somebody could, some Trump supporter could decide, oh, wouldn't it be cool to, shoot the CNN camera person or reporter? Um, again, it's his performance. He wants people not to trust the media. He wants us to think we're all uh, shills for the left. But
Yes.
there's been an important change in the second term, which is that the White House, the second Trump White House, and Trump is behind this, has taken away the ability of the White House Correspondents Association to determine
Uh,
who is in the daily pool. The pool are the small
uh-huh.
group of reporters who take turns every day
Mhm.
covering, being present with the president and recording his actions and words and reporting it to the rest of the press corps. The press corps consists of hundreds, if not thousands, of reporters, and we can't all be at the White House, and we can't all obviously be with the president. So when he's traveling, the press pool is 13 reporters, photographers, and camera people. When he's in Washington, it's a little bit bigger, but it's a limited group. Now the White House decides
Mhm.
who's in the briefing room, who's covering him, which is a violation of press freedom, I think, and of
Mhm.
separation between the principal, the person being covered, and the notion of an independent press. So you'll notice, if you ever watch a press briefing, you'll see some questions are straightforward, legitimate questions from legacy media. It could be from the New York Times or from the Associated Press or from other longstanding outlets, or it could be from something called Lindell TV or just the news or any number of quote unquote new media who the White House has now incorporated into the press corps. And the White House Correspondents Association objected strenuously about this, but ultimately we have no leverage because the White House has a monopoly on access to the president. So we can say we could boycott and say, well, we're not going to cover you anymore, and they'll go, great, and then they'd just fill the pool with mega media.
Yeah. All of this is done by precedent and custom, not by legislation. We do
Right.
not have a press law. I'm very, I'm very satisfied to live in a country that has no law determining. It may be the only country in the world, I think.
Mhm.
Um, so these things that seem to be violations are really the violations of custom, not of law. Can you discuss that? You say that traditionally the White House, WACA, right? Is that the name of it?
Mhm.
Determines the pool.
Mhm.
Uh, and by the way, do they do that by lottery or is there a certain
There are
logic?
rotations. We have rotations.
Okay, so
So we
everybody
take
gets
turns
in.
by list. It's alphabetical.
Okay, and I know that the press corps has always been very um, cooperative with one another. The
Mhm.
pool understands that it's their responsibility to relay the footage, the quotes to the
Mhm.
rest of the press corps. And I think historically they do that very, very well. Is that your
Yeah.
impression? Yeah. Uh,
Absolutely. No,
yeah.
it's yeah, we share if somebody didn't hear what he said, the somebody else will jump in. If you don't recognize somebody who's with the president, you could so I say covering the White House is a team sport.
Right. I've seen that in the field where during interesting moments like when Shevardnadze and his American counterpart when they initialed the ICM treaty. I remember that rainy day in Geneva, and the
Hmm.
journalists were soaked and cold. Some of them gave up, and then after Schultz and Shevardnadze actually announced that they had initialed, the press corps immediately got together. What did he say? Did he say this? Did he say that? And I
Hmm.
remember they were extremely collaborative, even
Yes.
though their media are
Hmm.
in competition with one another. I think it's remarkable.
Yeah.
Um, well, uh, and of course, you're mentioning the pool being determined at the White House by the White House, not by the White House. What does WACA stand for? White House
White House Correspondents
Corres Oh,
Association.
yeah, White House correspondent. Um, and at the Pentagon, we'll just call it the Pentagon since it's changed its name. Um, the standard media have been excluded. Am I correct on that?
Yeah,
Uh,
well, the way that worked is that they were asked to agree to certain terms,
right,
like anything, everything that they could gather from sources outside the press office was off limits, which is a complete violation of freedom of the press. And
right,
if you didn't agree to their terms, you would lose your press pass. So all the legitimate news outlets handed in their press passes. Even some
yes,
very conservative ones like Newsmax
yeah,
refused to play by that rule.
yeah. For those that missed that, who may not have seen, there was a dramatic, forget what day that was, but they all left, all of them, at the same time, and this was quite an event, a very somber and dark event. Well, the White House, at least there's access, although it's the pool which is determined. Um, Tell us more about being in the presence of Donald Trump on a plane or on a downtime. You mentioned that he enjoys this. He has this gracious side to him.
Mhm.
We don't know if we say split personality, we're getting into psychiatry there.
Yeah.
Um, but that's tell us more about how you say he loves the press. Now this comes as sort of a surprise after all of his criticism. Yeah,
Well, he loves the press except when he doesn't, right? I mean, the
yeah,
minute the minute he's criticized, he's very thin-skinned. So if he perceives a slight, he's obviously unhappy with us. But
yeah,
you know, I mean, he has when you have access to he's got his own megaphone as president, the bully pulpit, but to get the images out, to get the words out, he needs the media. He needs
yeah.
the Fox News cameras. Everybody's got a camera. He needs access to that. So he really needs us. I mean, if he were to exclude all media from covering him, and wanted to produce his own videos, a lot of people would not have anything to do with that. That's called state-run media, and that's not our tradition.
Yeah. Yesterday there was this funny moment where we know it was televised. He said Iceland when he meant Greenland. He said it four times.
Mhm.
And then the press spokesperson said he didn't say that. This really sounds like 1984. Is this the kind of observation that journalists make with one another? I mean, he absolutely said
Mhm.
Iceland when he meant Greenland, and he did
Right.
it four times. Um, when the White House news spokesperson
Mhm.
says this is not true, what goes through your mind?
That she's really skating on thin ice there. She's lying.
Yeah,
And any press secretary worth their salt does not lie to the press corps because
yeah,
then they lose all credibility. But we all know what he said. He said it on camera, right? He
yeah,
said
yeah,
Iceland over and over again when he meant Greenland.
yeah,
He's obviously, Caroline Levitt, his press secretary, I think
yeah,
is trying to prevent the Joe Biden analysis that he's losing a step and is not 100% there mentally. I'm also not a psychiatrist. I'm not a gerontologist. I'm not an expert on aging.
yeah,
But, so who knows why he did that? Was he, he was obviously misspeaking. Why can't you just say he obviously misspoke? Greenland is very icy. It's an easy mistake to make.
yeah,
She could also have argued he was tired, but maybe she doesn't want to say that. I mean, he had,
yeah,
you know, uh, been on a long flight, had been
yeah.
traveling the day
He
before.
was
Yeah.
he was visibly exhausted.
Yes. And he sounded
Um,
terrible. I actually listened to his speech on my car radio, and I almost wasn't sure that it was him. He sounded very hoarse.
yeah,
And yeah, he didn't sound good. So I'm not surprised he was
yeah.
misspeaking.
Um, we don't know, of course, but do you suppose that Caroline Levitt does these things on her own initiative? Is she directed? How directed is she, or does she sense in advance? She's very good at,
Yeah.
I think, figuring out what her boss wants
Yes.
and doing it. She's very smart, even though
Hmm.
she does lie. Um, how much direction does she get? You're guessing here, but
Yeah.
they tell her what to say, or she has an instinct, I think, of the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think I think it's her instinct. I agree with you on everything you said. I think she's doing exactly what the president wants. And and sadly, that now has veered into lying. I mean, she's been good up until now about promoting his positions and standing up for him and putting the best possible spin on what he says and does. But when she says something that's blatantly not true and that's provably false because it was on camera, I think she's in danger of not losing the president's trust, but losing any semblance of respect from the media. Um,
Yeah.
so, once a press secretary crosses into lying, then you literally don't know if anything she says is true.
Right. She does seem to maintain quite a cordial
Mhm.
atmosphere during her briefings, even when dealing with liberal or progressive media.
Mhm.
It appears as if she interacts. First of all, she knows their names. She has an
Mhm.
amazing memory, or there may be some way she has of charting people's names, but she's very cordial. She will argue, but she won't dismiss. She won't be dismissive. That's my impression. I don't know. Uh,
Yeah, no, I think there is a certain decorum in the briefing room that usually holds. And I think it's smart for reporters to be respectful.
yeah,
And because I mean ultimately they have a monopoly on their willingness to work with us. So we, in terms of getting quote getting things out of the press office, it isn't just the president. It's about all the people in the White House. If you want to get to a top administration official or to just get a comment from someone out of the press office, you can ask them uh, for that. And if they perceive you as a jerk, if they think you're rude, they'll just ignore you.
Yeah.
So I think there's no upside actually to being rude to them.
Yeah. From my recollection, in the first Trump presidency, the spokesperson was very rude and prefaced almost every remark with the word look. She would say, look. And I wanted to be in the room and say, do you think we're dogs? Why are you telling us where to look? So the tone, I think the tone is remarkably different during
Yeah.
the second administration.
Yeah.
Ah, what a job you have. We have I don't know if you have access to the chat. Nazar Sivak asks about the new media and its
Mm,
increasing popularity. Does this indicate just a shift in media consumption, or is it part of a broader strategy by the administration to
mm.
surround itself by loyal reporters? Intriguing question.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I
um,
think the answer is both. I mean, the new media, there's new media across the political spectrum. The media, the whole media business, the whole news business is in tremendous flux. Some venerable news outlets are closing and in their place, or they have become very small. They're a shadow of their former selves, and in their place, new media are springing up. So some new media are like major nonprofits, and the aspect of the media that's taken the biggest hit actually is local media.
right,
A lot of local papers have shut down. A shocking percentage of local papers, the business model no longer works, and the owners couldn't afford to keep going, and they just closed up shop. So
right.
what we're seeing is a lot of experimenting in nonprofit media. People can donate, or you get foundations who will
Mhm.
support the media. Now at the White House, there's, the legacy media, I would agree, has a perhaps a liberal, leans a little bit liberal. That's particularly pronounced in with this current White House, which is very, um, mindful of bias. And so what we're seeing is the rise of all kinds of pro-Trump media. That's one aspect of new media. There's new media rising up from all kinds of sources. I mean, even an outlet like Politico, which I don't know off the top of my head how long Politico's been around. I even think of them almost as legacy media, but that's
Yes.
a
Oh,
pretty new outlet. They
and the
you know,
Hill. Yeah.
they're online. Yeah, so a lot of the new media are only online. There's no print publication anymore.
Right. Um, and we were speaking some weeks ago with Robert Fry, who was a news producer for ABC years ago, and
Mm.
who commented he was describing he was in the newsroom the day Kennedy was shot, and he
Wow.
was referring to the sort of cohesion, social cohesion that we used to have when there
Mhm.
were three networks and some notable printed media, that the nation had a moment of being together.
Yes.
And he lamented the loss of that. Are you troubled by the proliferation of these many new media? Thank you, Nazar, for that great
Yeah.
question. Um,
Um, I'm not troubled by it. I think, experimentation is good. I mean, it's true that in some ways the barriers to entry for news media are much lower than they used to be. I mean, producing news is expensive, especially if you're going to, travel and commit yourself
yeah,
to covering the president. Um, but you know, in some ways, having a very small monopoly is also not a good thing. I think, the trick is for consumers of news, so for the public to understand how to interpret what it is they're seeing. If you're watching say a news outlet like Newsmax, which has a lot of money, is very successful, and has some legitimate reporters, and then has also reporters who propagate conspiracy theories. You have to be, I think, news consumers have to be more sophisticated than ever to learn to know who's reliable and who isn't. I mean,
Hmm.
I encourage people of all ages to consume news widely. Don't just watch liberal news outlets, also watch, and read across the spectrum. I watch a lot of Fox News. Fox News leans conservative, but they're fact-based. I don't see Fox News propagating crazy conspiracies.
Hmm.
So I think it's good to watch Fox News. I mean, but even within that universe, there's some people who I think are more reliable than others, and I think
Yeah.
so. It's a very complicated question in some ways,
Yeah.
but I think if you have have common sense, you can understand who's telling you, giving you facts, and who's just
Yeah.
making up wild
I
conspiracies.
think especially during the first Trump administration, Fox News was getting all the leaks. And if you wanted
Yes.
to know, um, they were the first sometimes to have actual news. You mentioned that this whole thing requires more discernment on the part of the consumer,
Mhm.
but it seems to me that there's less and less of that. What is your sense? People seem
Yes.
to be jumping to conclusions and retreating to their own the
Yeah.
media that they're more comfortable with. Does that sound right? Uh,
Absolutely. And social media has made this even worse. So we talk about media silos.
yes.
People
Mhm.
they live in their little channels. They read what they read. They come up with ideas on what it all means, and then they perpetuate that on social media. And you have all these podcasts too that are where anybody can say anything. I mean, this country has and celebrates free speech, which I applaud, and I agree with you that there shouldn't be laws governing press freedom. Press freedom is central to what this country is about, but it puts a lot of responsibility on the consumer to behave responsibly, to check the facts. If you read something online, don't just necessarily assume it's true. Go check it out. What's the source? What do other people say? Sometimes I ask somebody will say something to me. I'm like, where did you get that? Where's that from? Oh, I read it on the internet. Well, that's not an answer. The internet is full of all kinds of stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
as everybody knows. So,
Well, this can only be disheartening to you. You are not a social activist and should not be.
mhm.
But how can you imagine how would we improve this? It seems as if people are retreating more and more rather than less and less to their own siloed opinions. It's the opposite of what we think would make for a robust and productive news atmosphere. If you if somebody said, Linda Feldman, fix this, how would you do that?
Oh my gosh. I that's wow, that's the zillion-dollar question. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
I guess there's no one way to communicate to everybody. So
yeah,
I just I guess those of us who can see what's happening and think that people need to think more critically, all we can do is just urge people to think critically. And I
yeah,
don't mean negatively, I mean just use your common sense and
yeah.
consider your sources and just keep an open mind.
Yeah. One of the principles of journalism is in order to publish a story, you have to have two sources. Maybe consumers should also have two sources.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, it's interesting to see,
uh,
how different outlets cover the same event. Yeah, you can almost
yeah,
triangulate. Okay,
yeah.
what's really going on here?
Um, and then we didn't get to the second part of Nazar's question, which
Mm.
these very much publicized the pressure by the current FCC on networks and also I'm not even following the mergers and the buyouts and the transfers of, this seems to be very ominous. It seems as if the FCC is threatening the
Mhm.
boards of the broadcast networks with some success. They
Mhm.
took two late night comedians off the air and they were both brought back temporarily.
Mhm.
And so there seems to be a politicization of
Mhm.
the FCC. I think that's what Nazar is implying. Does that trouble you, or is that true?
It is troubling, and what we're seeing is a very transactional approach to uh, to these corporate mergers. So I don't cover this issue in particular, so I can't tell you who's buying whom.
Right.
But for example, with CBS, one of
Yeah.
the major TV networks, excuse me, they're in the middle of trying to get approval from the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, about something, and therefore are very solicitous toward the president and toward the administration. And I mean, I think that's highly inappropriate. And we're seeing all kinds of upset around, they make decisions on whether to run, say, an episode, a story on 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
There was a story about the prison in El Salvador, CCOP,
Ah,
which they held back for a month. And then they finally ran it, but the idea was that this was CBS trying to curry favor with the FCC, and that is very much a bad sign about press freedom.
people say this is anti-American. I would agree. It is anti-American. That the executive branch of the US government would actually seek to manipulate. This is what happens in dictatorships.
Yes.
And the word is being used more often these days, dictatorship, but that's a very dark subject.
Mm.
Tatiana Mikolajczyk asks about the increasing use of emotional appeals. We were at the beginning of this module, this course module, we were talking about distinctions between public diplomacy and propaganda. Um, Aristotle, logos, ethos, pathos. And we were talking about how propaganda tends to use pathos much more than the other two, logic and awareness of your audience.
Mhm.
We had a short discussion on that, and we did say that in propaganda, which is something we don't want to have uh, running our lives.
Mhm.
The appeal to emotions seems
Mhm.
to be very strident. We also are mindful that the former foreign minister of Ukraine, Dmytro Kuleba,
Mhm.
wrote a book called The War of Against Truth, in
Mm.
which he says repeatedly and very convincingly, he says it's much easier to elicit a response from the observer through hatred and fear
Mhm.
than it is through any positive measure.
Right.
Um, Comments on that? Tatiana says, "What are
Yeah.
the risks?" Um,
Well, yes. I
yeah,
mean, just listen to Donald Trump speak. Listening to him talk about immigrants in this country and the fear mongering, describing them all basically as drug dealers and rapists. I mean, it goes right back to his very first campaign speech
yep,
when he ran the first time for president almost 11 years ago. I mean, we've been subjected to this type of rhetoric for quite a long time, the demonization. And I mean, it's heartbreaking to listen to that because he is sowing fear around immigrants in particular. And it's definitely that it gets definitely gets people's attention. And he's playing on people's emotions. I mean, there's always some bad story out there that you can highlight. He doesn't want to talk about the the countless very wonderful stories about what immigrants have done for this country. I mean, as you know, this country was built on immigration. I mean, America would not be the country it is without our immigrants. We're all immigrants. I mean,
yeah,
my father's side came to this country in the 1800s from Germany,
yeah,
and you know, the immigrants in my life. came sooner, but they're in some ways more dedicated to working hard and providing for their children than people whose families have been here for generations. So that his demonization of immigrants might be the best example of the use of fear and anger that this president is doing. And my hope is that when he leaves office, that we we can put that away and
Yeah.
move on to a more hopeful approach to public communication.
Yeah, two questions come to mind. One is, how do you maintain sanity when everything your professional ethics guides you to do is
Mhm.
being challenged by, as you say, demonization? How are you able to separate your personal
Mhm.
concern of this troubling trend versus the requirement that you report objectively? That must be very difficult.
So it's been exhausting actually, but I've been doing this so long. The way I describe it is putting my opinions and emotions in a box.
Uh-huh.
So my job is to just look at what's happening, listen to what's being said, and then, write something. I mostly write news analysis, um, and try not to make it about me because it's really not about me. It's about what's happening. What do think I think about people I know. I think about, like my mother, who's 88 years old, 100% sharp, reads the news, um, educated. So I think about sort of the typical reader. What do they want to know? What do they need to know? What's important? I don't, and what I think, if I was a columnist, then it would be more about what I think, what I personally think and feel. But I'm as a consumer of news, I'm more interested in just sort of understanding what's happening and why. Like why, and the thing to understand about Trump is it's not just Donald Trump. Millions and millions and millions of people voted for him. So to me, what's in some ways more interesting than Donald Trump himself is what it says about this country that he was elected twice.
Yeah. Um, and then second question, you mentioned the hope, I think we all have this hope of going back to something a bit more positive and more productive, more normal
Hmm.
after this administration. Prime Minister Mark Carney, two
Mm.
days ago, said, don't expect that ever to happen. Nostalgia, he made a very striking comment about saying, what we have is not a transition, it's a rupture.
Mm.
And that had a lot of resonance, we are told, in the room when he said, it's unrealistic to think of going back to something we had before.
Mm.
It's gone. It's ruptured. Did he overstate that? And we're getting into
Yeah,
personal
yeah.
opinion here.
No,
Uh,
no. And in fact, I wanted to thank you for flagging Mark Carney's speech because
yeah,
I wasn't able to watch that, but I did read about it and it sounded very compelling.
yeah,
So, you know, people are already thinking a lot about the quote post-Trump era. And
right.
absolutely, you can't go back in time. We can't put the genie back in the bottle and pretend this never happened and go back to the way things used to be. But we're about to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And this country has been around a long time. And there are certain aspects of this country that I think should survive.
Hmm.
If Donald Trump survives 3 more years, some people don't think, I mean, he's almost 80.
Yeah,
So people don't think he lives to see the end of his term. I'm not a doctor. Who knows?
yeah,
But the thing about Donald Trump is that I think he's unique. I think only Trump can do Trump.
uh-huh,
So the aspects of our society that he's bringing to the fore, I think is something that's unique to him. If JD Vance were to become president, I think he would continue a lot of what Trump is doing, but he doesn't have the personal charisma
right.
Trump has, and that sort of gives juice and energy to, I think, some of the more negative sides of Trump. So no matter who the next president is, whether it's JD Vance or Marco Rubio or any one of the dozens of Democrats who are already gearing up to run,
Yeah.
it's going to be their job, I think, to almost go through a national catharsis for whichever party they are, Republican or Democrat. They will have to acknowledge that the Trump years were challenging for this country. What it's done to us as a people, just the disruption, and we need to maybe get back to basics, like just be kind to your neighbors and be helpful. I
Yeah.
mean, but
Mhm.
we know that's already happening. I mean, most people are kind and good people and honest, and the news tends to focus on the negative, right? We read
Yeah.
about plane crashes and crimes. We don't, you never see a headline that says 10,000 flights landed safely today,
Right. Right.
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
Um, yeah. Thinking outside of the American context, which we should do since the people on this call, majority are not Americans. Carney said, how did he call them? Mid-sized countries or countries that are not superpowers, but that have some significance, like Germany, UK, um, need to think differently in he was very careful how he worded this. What he meant was if there's a hegemon, the
mhm,
smaller countries must have a consistent approach which could enable them to prosper as country to I think he even used the Ben Franklin quote, we should hang together or we'll hang separately. Um,
mhm,
and suggesting, and apparently this had a lot of resonance in the room, that the mid-sized countries, Canada, UK, Germany, France, are required. They have to have some kind of cooperation in
mhm.
order for the purpose of not being bullied by the larger countries. Um, this is not your bailiwick. This is not the sort of thing that you work with every day. But what is your guess that the mid-sized countries might be well advised to do in
I
terms
think
of,
he's absolutely correct.
yeah,
I mean, I think that this return of Donald Trump has demonstrated that these alliances that we've had with, NATO, et cetera, and some of these agreements that Trump has pulled out of, the climate accord, et cetera, that those are, you know, those were an ideal and are, I mean, NATO still exists, but that the non-US countries in these alliances, uh, I think, if not formally, at least informally, do need to have their
mm,
own, and I know they're doing this, their own channels of communication on
yeah,
on how to deal with a United States that isn't what a lot of them thought it was.
yeah,
Um, so I mean, for you as a retired diplomat, it must be bracing to see the institutions that we all thought were here to stay and rock solid, NATO being at the top of the list in danger. I mean, the idea of Trump taking Greenland by force, from
yeah,
effectively a NATO member going to war
yeah,
against Denmark to take
yeah,
Greenland. I mean, that's like a
yeah,
Danish journalist friend of mine he's retired and he's writing a book that is part fact and part fiction. And he says every day something else happens that's part of the fiction part of his book. So he has to come up with something even crazier.
yeah, yeah. Um, not, I try to keep myself not a topic of conversation, but some months ago I attended a meeting uh, conducted by right-wing politicians on the subject of Greenland. I went because I've been to Greenland 3 times
Mm,
and
wow.
quite love that place. And they were making this argument long before Trump said he would use force. They were saying these were Heritage Foundation people. They said we need to basically what we've been hearing from Trump. And it was time for questions and answers. My career is finished. I thought I risk nothing. I asked the first question, which was, Um, the Greenlandic government, only a week prior, the prime minister had published an op-ed saying, "We want American cooperation. We want you to come and help us find the rare earths. We want you to come
Mhm.
and put in all the security installations you want." So my question was, why the obsession over a flag? And I tell that story not to draw attention to myself. The response was quite intriguing. There was a moment of silence, and the speaker said, "Well, I guess we could have a cooperative arrangement." No, I mean, I joke that if that ever does happen, and it seems that it might,
Mhm.
maybe that was the moment, because we know that the Heritage Foundation whispers to the president. I'm probably going to have to edit this out of the recording.
Eh.
Um, Rahm Emanuel.
Mm.
What apparently he's really wants to be president. What do you think about that?
So
Uh,
yeah, no, he you may have seen that I hosted a it was a coffee
oh,
yesterday with Rahm Emanuel and about
I heard it. I didn't know that was you.
yes,
I heard.
I hosted that
Oh my
yesterday.
gosh. Oh my God. Now that was a fascinating thing. Good for you. I didn't realize that was your. I heard it. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was yeah, C-SPAN recorded it. So anybody who wants to see or listen to it, they just go to the C-SPAN website.
Boy, you're the one. You're the one.
So no, Rahm Emanuel he's a total character, right? I
Yeah.
mean, has had many very high level positions, chief of staff to President Obama and mayor of Chicago and a high level member of Congress
An
and
ambassador.
recently
Yeah.
ambassador to Japan.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of discuss and he really ended up being sort of the emissary to Asia. You know, he could get Joe Biden on the phone anytime, and that's what makes an ambassador have sway, is their access to the big guy. So, you know, is Rahm Emanuel our next president? I tend to doubt it, but I think he wants to be relevant, and I think he, you know, has a lot of energy. I think this is maybe a sort of a retirement project for him. I mean, he's not that old. He's 66. But he's, you know, running around. I think he's just trying to help the Democratic Party because he's more of a centrist.
Yep.
I think he's seeing the left wing of the Democratic Party hurt the party in some ways
Mhm.
and trying to nudge the party back to the center.
Okay.
And when you act like you're running for president, then the media pay more attention to you, like us, and then that propagates your ideas.
Uh-huh. He did say, yeah, I guess it was your interview. He said anybody over the age of 75 should
Yes.
be asked to leave. Now,
Yes.
can you imagine that ever being codified?
So that's, you know,
Uh,
it's an interesting idea. I mean, it isn't just we've had these two geriatric presidents in a row and
Not to mention many of the senators.
well, I was going to say
Yeah.
on Capitol Hill, which is it would have to be by legislation, you got a lot of senators and House members who are well beyond retirement age.
Yep.
And you know, it's these are nice jobs. And once people get them, they're like, hey, I like this. I have all this staff who will do all these things for me. And I can, you know, the media pays attention to me. So
Mhm.
um,
Um,
I, I can't see that passing, but he got a lot of attention for saying that.
yes, and you were the platform. Wow, that's very
Oh,
this.
but just in fairness, it might have been Ram did two events yesterday. The first, maybe you heard the first one. This was at the Center for American Progress.
I think I heard him with you, but
Okay.
we'll look at
Well,
that.
anyway, because
But yeah,
he talked about his proposal for mandatory retirement at 75. He talked about that at CAP and
uh-huh.
at our roundtable.
Well, okay. Now we're kind of at the end of the hour. I don't want to let you go before getting some of your comments. The kind of organizational principle of this series of sessions, January, February. Um, what do we do about foreign propaganda, FIMI, foreign information and malign interference?
Mm,
This is this is not your business, but communication is.
mhm,
And we've talked about this in a kind of theoretical way. Aristotle would say A, B, and C. Um, we know that FIMI is un seems to be unchallenged in the global south at least, and in many other parts of the world. We have some Kenyans on the line today, and they're very aware, I think, of the in the global south because of a lack of information. People don't have money to
Right.
purchase newspapers or subscriptions, so they get a lot of their information on social media. The Russian Federation has taken over
Hmm.
um, that whole sphere. I don't have a specific question. How do you
Hmm.
think about that, and what can be done?
Well, I know the State Department used to have an office that dealt with
Yeah,
Soviet disinformation, and I
yeah.
think
The
after the
Global Engagement Center. Go
Global
on.
Engagement Center,
But
and a friend of mine, Jason Steinhauer, I don't know if you know him.
no, no.
He's a an expert on this, and I can connect you to him.
Right.
But yes, it's a huge problem, and the Russians have been at it for decades. We know they do this stuff that's not true and is malicious, seeps into the mainstream. And people believe things that are false and dangerous and potentially even deadly, and they're doing so unwittingly. The people who believe this bad information, and yes, we see that, in the global South, in societies that don't have a lot of money, it's hard for them to sort of protect people. People sadly have to protect themselves. And I really wish the US government, I don't know if you might know, Dan, if they're still doing this at the State Department or did that
No, the
get shut down?
actually even before Trump, it's called the GEC, the Global Engagement Center, which
Yeah.
had 200 employees. I
Wow.
would say they had zero success in what
Yeah.
they were doing. They did the best thing they did, I think, was to be aware of some of the NGOs and
Mhm.
assist them because government nobody listens to a government, nobody, nor should they.
Right.
And in any case, it was entirely removed in the first days of this Trump administration. I'm looking at my calendar. On February 9th, we will have Carl Stoltz, who was a senior director at the Global Engagement Center.
Oh.
And of course, you're very welcome to join us on that. That would be 10
Mm.
o'clock on the 9th. And he makes a good argument. I don't always agree with everything Carl
Hmm.
says, but he's very knowledgeable about how FEME works, and he does have ideas about what could be done about it. He argues that if the GEC had been allowed to survive a bit longer, it was
Hmm.
just beginning to get a sense of how to deal with this.
Hmm.
It does not have a good track record, but he argues if they had just been permitted to go another year or so, there could
Hmm.
have been some good results. So that's QED, right?
Yeah.
So um, you mentioned age. The age does not seem to be a factor in Europe, in Africa. Well, in Africa, of course, you have
You're talking about
Museveni.
the age of leaders?
Yeah, you do
Yeah.
have a big issue in Uganda, in
Mhm.
Cameroon, and
Yeah.
in Republic of Congo. But in Kenya, many Kenyans are very dissatisfied with the leadership there. But there's a very strong presence of youth activism,
Mhm.
and which I find very intriguing and very hopeful. It makes me very hopeful. We should, as Americans, it's easy to get discouraged. I am, and I think we all have moments of that. So
Mhm.
we can find more hopeful situations, I think, in some of the countries that we don't always focus on, like Kenya, for example, which where the youth has actually succeeded in getting a government that they do not like to
Mhm.
make some changes in their favor.
Hmm.
Um, so, as as a follower of the White House, that's your job.
Mhm.
To what extent does that bring you into an international context? A lot of what Trump does is domestic, domestic. Even in Davos, he was talking about making housing more affordable. I mean, this is not an international issue. Uh,
Right.
what we haven't talked, and maybe we should. Does your job um, give you insights into international
Mhm.
mechanisms and international relations. We all have some exposure to this, but we're not all exactly focused on it as our primary interest. How much of following Trump
Mhm.
brings you into international news?
So it's ironically, I'm an internationalist at heart, and I got a degree from SAIS, Masters in
Yeah.
International Public Policy, but in my work, I am largely focused on domestic affairs. But I
Yeah.
am very interested in the world and in what's happening in other countries and the influence that the United States has on that. So and thinking about these older leaders, in many countries, African countries, somebody was joking that our White House looks like our current leaders look like the Politburo. I mean, there's Trump.
Yes.
I don't know,
Yeah.
but
Uh,
yeah, I mean, Trump is very domestically focused, but interestingly, he has turned America first into a very internationalist concept, right? I mean, he made it sound like he was going to be an isolationist. But
uh-huh.
then lo and behold, he's got what the joke is, it's the Don Roe doctrine, right? That
Yeah.
he's
Hmm.
making the Western Hemisphere all about United States. It's not just about controlling or owning Greenland. It's taking back the Panama Canal and making Canada the 51st state and sending U.S. military into Mexico to fight the drug cartels, invading Venezuela and arresting their president. I mean, the list goes on, and Lord knows what is to come. So, in fact, Donald Trump is an internationalist. I mean, the analysis
Yeah.
now is that he sort of wants to take over the world. I mean, he's started this, what's it called? The Board of Peace.
Yes. And if you have $1 billion, you're welcome to be
Yes,
part
you're
of it.
welcome to apply if you want
Yeah.
to give me $1 billion.
Yeah.
But then his latest thing was that that wasn't obligatory. That was just a suggested donation. Like when you go to a
Um,
concert, suggested
yeah.
donation of
Yeah.
$10. And some critics are saying that this quote board of peace, which is supposed to focus on Gaza, that
Right.
it's actually kind of the seeds of an entity that could even replace the United Nations.
Right. Right.
We know that the United Nations, Donald Trump does not like the United Nations. He doesn't like the veto power that certain countries have. He wants him to be the sole veto power. He'd be the head of the Board of Peace for life.
Yep.
He has suggested. I mean, this leader for life thing. I mean, there's a sort of megalomania embedded in there. I mean, with Trump, he makes these suggestions and then sometimes he acts on them and sometimes he doesn't, or they disappear.
Yep.
He mentioned Greenland and then that disappeared for months and we thought, all right, he's given up on Greenland, and then it comes roaring back.
Yep.
But I think the point about the US on the international stage is that he sees the entire planet as his domain. And uh, it's up to the rest, the other countries, as you suggested, to sort of work independently and not necessarily form an organ. They can informally communicate and talk about how to deal with this because it is having an impact on the entire globe.
Yeah. And for reference, if people are not aware, Linda mentioned SAIS, which is the School of Advanced International Studies of Johns Hopkins University. Johns Hopkins is in Baltimore, but SAIS is a major, I would say the most outstanding school of international studies based in Washington. And you were Moscow correspondent. Um, this is a tremendous paradox that the notion of America first, and they've been saying America first, does that mean America alone? Some of the subordinates are saying that point. Fiona Hill was talking with David Frum the other day, and they
Mm,
were mentioning how um, this has become an international movement, a right-wing populist movement. We see it in Hungary. We see it in Italy with Meloni, and they were talking about this paradox, and then both of them realizing while currently this isolationist tendency has become internationalized. It's a
Yes.
big paradox. The opposite was true during the Cold War, that
Hmm.
there were left-wing movements that
Hmm.
had some sympathy with the Soviet Union, that the what seemed at the time to be purely domestic was in fact international. I guess the question is there any distinction any longer between domestic and international opinion? That seems to be falling apart.
Yeah, no, I mean, good
But
point. I hadn't thought about sort
yeah,
of in in the Cold War that you had the global left, now we have the global
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, eh, it's it's all kind of self-reinforcing. But what I keep coming back to is that all things that can feel very present and in some ways dangerous, that ultimately I keep telling myself this too shall pass. I mean,
Huh?
this kind of global nationalism. Yes, ironically, this international club of very nationalist, either leaders or parties or movements, is they have to produce results. I mean, if they end up just hurting their countries, then, average people will be unhappy, and unhappy voters are dangerous voters,
So,
right?
so I guess we can say nothing is forever. And
Yes, we had a civil war and we recovered from that. The nation survived. We had an actual civil war. You have to go back to that, I think, to
um,
to feel some hope for the future.
that is such a remarkable observation. I think that can serve as our conclusion. Um, Linda Feldman, thank you so much. Before you leave, I just want everybody to know next Monday, Rick Ruth, you haven't heard of him. He kept public diplomacy alive for 30 years. He was in the back rooms. He was the envoy from the political leaders of the American public diplomacy apparatus. He was the one going to Capitol Hill and
Mm,
convincing senators and congressmen to vote for funds for public diplomacy. In many instances, it was about to be zeroed out of the budget. Rick Ruth rescued it, and he will join us on Monday. On
mm.
Thursday, you're all interested about Iran, correct? Maybe Linda knows Barbara Slavin. Is it possible you know
Oh, I
Barbara?
do know Barbara.
Yes, and
Is she
she will.
is she speaking to your
She
class?
will join us on Thursday. Linda, I want you as a regular participant. I mean, a week ago I was thinking we got to get Barbara now. But actually, the crisis in Iran is an
Hmm.
ongoing thing. It's not going away. And I think um, by next Thursday, it's going to be really the top of the news. And we have Barbara to talk about that.
Hmm.
Um, and then the following week, Aaron McKee, who was remember U.S. Agency for International Development, which has been dismantled. Erin McKee was the head of the Europe section of USAID, and she has now joined a nonprofit entirely devoted to Ukraine. And so
Mm.
those are the things coming up. Linda, I'll send you a little list of things that we have coming up. You're very busy covering this mercurial White House, but if you ever have time, we'd love to have you join us. And thank you, everybody. I don't know if this gets us closer to knowing how to deal with FEME, but it certainly gives us a deeper understanding of how the mechanism works in Washington.
Mhm.
We may be a power in decline, but we're still very important. And I think you see the emojis of thanks, Linda. Thanks so
Great.
much, and hope to see you again soon.
Great. Well,
Bye
thank you
bye.
for having me.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.